everyone, and welcome back to the Courage Conversation Show. I'm your host, Ashley Easter. I am the founder and executive director of Courage 365, and we have a great show planned for you today. So, if you're not familiar with Courage 365, this is the first time you're tuning in. We talk all things empowerment for survivors of abuse and advocates who support them. We have a lot of resources on our website, but this is one of our resources that we offer to the community. We have conversations with guests who are either survivors or advocates. And we really talk about not only the stories of where people have been, but also the tips and tools they've learned along the way to really help you in your healing and empowerment journey. So, we're actually bringing on a guest that we've had before, Andrew Plager. If you have not heard his first episode from last season, you're going to want to go back and listen to that where we talk more about his story. But it was such a popular episode that I wanted to bring him back again today and dive a little deeper, ask a couple of new questions of him. And before we do that, I'm just going to give you a quick refresher by reading his bio. So, Andrew Plager is a content creator, an activist, and writer using social media to share his story and inspire others. He is a religious trauma survivor raised in a fundamentalist Christian cult. He is LGBTQ plus and brings awareness to spiritual and religious abuse. Andrew was expelled from Bob Jones University after a controversial interview with author Josh Harris. His experiences have inspired him to pursue psychology and to help other survivors. You're in for a treat. So, without further ado, let's bring Andrew onto the show. Hey, Andrew, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me back on. I am so excited to be here.
I'm excited too. I really love how you are focusing on empowering LGBTQ plus survivors. We're going to dive into that. I know a lot of our audience identifies that way. And so we want to provide support and voices in our community that really get that specific type of survivorship. And so I kind of want to jump right into the interview. I've got some questions laid out for you. And the first one is, in our first interview, we talked about your story about Bob Jones and all of that. But what I want to focus on today, like I said, is LGBTQ plus trauma. So, what I have seen a lot is rightly there are resources for people who are right in the midst of abuse. I've seen resources for people who are trying to decide how they can square their LGBTQ plus identity with their faith and a lot of conversations around affirming LGBTQ individuals. And those are so important. Those are much needed. But a hole that I have seen and that I've heard from our community is that, okay, so once you affirm yourself and your own identity, after you are out of the trauma, there's still this process of living with the aftermath. And I wonder, what do you think is next in somebody's healing journey after they've left that toxic environment? What have you seen be helpful? And do you think this is an important area of discussion to have?
Yes, I love how you mentioned there's kind of a missing space for people who want to leave that environment completely. And I understand why people of faith, specifically queer people of faith, want to find that affirming theology or shift their faith. I understand people can find meaning and purpose in that. But for me, I did not want to find that affirmation in theology. I decided for myself that I could do that on my own and not let a rigid system define me. But I think the hard thing is when you do decide to leave that high control environment, you're like, who am I? W- What do I do? And you were so dependent on that system, and then you're grappling with the trauma from that. And I think through the healing of that, it's really hard to admit that system is harming you because in these religious environments, they never paint themselves as the issue. If there's an issue, you are blamed and you are shamed. You need to pray more. You need to believe more, trust, read the Bible, whatever. All these lists of things you're supposed to do. And if it's not working, it's your fault. It's always you. It's never the system. The system is untouchable. The theology or the interpretation of theology is untouchable. And for me personally, I remember basically being told, "Oh, yeah, you can pray to God and you can be healed from homosexuality," because in the IFB, it was seen as a disease, even just an attack of Satan or a demon expressing itself through you. It was seen as very demonic. And so in that environment, the only solution is then going by their guidelines of spirituality. I had to pray this away. I had to believe. I had to repent and get rid of this. And so there's so much trauma from all of this self hatred in that environment and the just internalized homophobia and not being in an environment where you are loved and accepted for who you are and where you can express yourself and your needs. And a lot of queer people are subjected to conversion therapy, which is really like psychological, spiritual, emotional abuse. And it can even get to physical abuse at times in conversion therapy. And so it takes a lot to recognize and to someone from the outside looking in, they might think, "Oh my gosh, that's so obvious." But people don't on the outside usually don't understand the process of indoctrination and being told your entire life this is the truth, you can't question it, and not having outside resources. So it takes a lot of courage to question that and to say that no, this system is messed up and I am going to leave. And I think this has been a conversation I think that has definitely been happening a lot in more recent years. It's just the idea of intersectionality of how our different social identities overlap and affect how we experience different systems or different social environments. And a lot of activists are calling for we need to just dismantle these systems completely, and I agree with that. But really, what I've learned is that these systems aren't going to change because they want power. That's really what it's about, power and control. And so for me, what I realized the most powerful thing I could do was leave this abusive system and encourage other people to do the same because a cult or a high control system or whatever, it's nothing without its followers. And when you get out of that, you're it's devastating because you don't have your structure, you don't have your community anymore, and you've lost your sense of meaning, and you were so dependent on the group, and that's what makes it nearly impossible for so many people to leave. So I think every situation is different. So if people are planning to leave that abusive environment, really to save themselves from abuse and to heal from their trauma and just protect their mental health in general. What I found helpful was like a slow process of planning and figuring out what I needed and how to meet those needs. And so I would be able to make it on the outside so I wouldn't be crawling back and become so dependent on that system.
That makes a lot of sense. And that was exactly answering the questions that I was interested in. And one thing I wanted to touch on that I thought was really interesting about your journey, you talked about how for some people, using theology to affirm themselves can be empowering. But for other people, it's not. And you just stepped away and was like, I can learn to affirm myself without using this structure. And I don't have a lot of experience with that in my own deconstruction journey. I'm not LGBTQ plus. I'm straight, but I did have some similar pieces in that, for instance, patriarchy. For me, I was taught that women were not as valuable as men. And then for me, my first step out of that belief system was finding a theology that affirmed women, egalitarian theology. And I was able to find scholars who used the Bible in a way that was like affirming to women. And that gave me this courage of, okay, I can maintain my faith and still believe in equality for women. And then eventually, as I deconstructed even further, I was like, you know what? I actually don't even need this book to affirm me. I see so many examples in my own life and the world around me that, with or without theology to back me up, I believe that I am a valuable and equal human being, whether or not I could square that with that theological framework. But for me, it was very much a journey of first, I felt like I needed to find a way and a theology to affirm my identity as an equal person in society, and then it was only after I'd already settled that in my mind that I realized, "Oh, there's other systems out here that I can just affirm myself." But it sounds like you skipped over that step, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just like you didn't need that bridge step. So how with internalized homophobia, like, how do you get to a place where you accept yourself and you don't need a system outside of you to affirm you as an equally valuable person?
Oof, that's quite a question. And it's good for me to answer it because I think these kind of interviews are good for my own processing and my own healing. But I think for me, I threw out that system because it was just never going to work for me. And dealing with that internalized homophobia, I think it was a slow process. I think learning to find people who I could be myself around and express myself, I think was really helpful. And I think really questioning the doctrine of utter human depravity, that there was nothing good inside of me. Now, that is something I was always taught, and they would add on in their sermons that, oh yeah, homosexuals, God hates them so much. Their abomination was like so much more worse. And it was even like compared to murder at times. And questioning that, I didn't really research into the theology behind it, but I was like, "What? There's nothing good inside of me at all? Like, really? And I can't do anything good without believing in this God?" And so I was like, "Okay, like, there are other people out there that maybe," because I was taught that people outside our group or he didn't believe were just absolutely wicked and we don't need to interact with the world. That extreme us versus them mindset and that phobia indoctrination to keep us scared of the outside world and to stay into the group. So I think for me, dealing really my in the beginning, I feel like my mind automatically adapted to that trauma because of my mental health was just so terrible. Disassociation was something that happened a lot, and kind of my mind created a different self-perception to kinda distance that part of myself from who I thought I was, and so then that can only work for so long. Those trauma responses and the mind adapting to different things, but I think for me, I feel like in the beginning, there was a point where I did do some research a little bit on, okay, are there gay Christians and what is that like? And in that environment, you're forced to believe those things and you're trying to decide, okay, is this really me? Or is it because I was so dependent on this system that if I didn't believe this, I would lose so much? And so once I started researching more a little bit, I was like, you know what? I don't really care if this affirms me or not. I should be able to love myself no matter what. I should be able to love every part of me, and that's still something I'm still dealing with every not as bad as it used to be, but still coping with to a certain extent. But I just absolutely hated, like, in the independent fundamental Baptist movement, how we I was taught that self-care was selfish, and you weren't really supposed to love yourself because, oh yeah, who you are is evil, and you need to get rid of that person. So, once I started to have a curious, I guess you would say, attitude towards myself, like being like, why am I evil? Because why I'm imperfect? And also just logically thinking of this isn't my choice. This is just a part of who I am. And if God hates me because of that, then this being shouldn't have created me in the first place. Just logically, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And I think also getting to know myself also made me realize that all the hateful things the IFB said about queer people, it wasn't true. They were generalizing and they were spreading hate speech and bigotry because I didn't know it then, but realizing that, oh my gosh, like they're threatened by anyone who is really different from them and who doesn't conform to their binary system. And I didn't fit into that system. And so it was a very slow process of learning to love myself without needing that affirmation from religion or other people. And I think part of it was that I really had to learn to become dependent on myself because I knew I couldn't find the needs I needed inside that environment. I'm still human. I still need human interaction and I still need that safe environment. So I think it was that slow process of being curious about myself and getting to know myself, despite being in an environment where I was told not to do that. It got to the
Mhm.
point of, "Okay, what you're telling me isn't working, so I'm gonna go to the place that you're telling me not to go, and I'm going to explore the places you're telling me not to explore, and I'm gonna question the things you're telling me not to question." And there's so much cognitive dissonance that comes with that, and as healthy individuals, we need to adjust our belief system when we have evidence or information that goes completely against our beliefs. And I think really that's what I did as I slowly on my journey undid that internalized homophobia. And I think also like when I finally got internet access, just having watching YouTube couples online in a relationship or something like that, or seeing it on TV and just seeing what it was really like, and eventually getting to college and exploring outside of Bob Jones and meeting other people. Like, when you meet the person you've been told to hate, and for me, like, it turned I was the person that I hated because of that, and those generalizations fall apart, and the caricatures and stereotypes they create, it just falls apart, and it still, I think, does take time to deal with that internalized homophobia, and it slowly dissipates, and I've been surprised, I think, how quickly for me that's been able to go away, but I think for me, it's probably been since I was 16 years old, and I'm 23 now, so 6 since I've been 16, I've been undoing that internalized homophobia, and I think is also about reassociating positive things with that, I think. And the sad thing is that there are queer people who are repressing their sexual identity and they're continuing the internalized homophobia and are sadly still trying to pray the gay away. But because I was able to be curious and question that system and find new information and meet new people and exploring my really myself over time, I was able to undo that.
Wow. That makes so much sense, and I love how you were able to find your worth and value outside of a particular system, and you don't need that affirmation. I know some people enjoy having that, and I know that there are ways to square theology with being affirming, but to know that that could be an add-on if somebody wants it, but it doesn't have to be the core of what allows you to believe positive things about yourself. That's really powerful. And also just what you were saying about when you're told like these caricatures and stereotypes about people, and then you actually meet them in person. I remember some of my first interactions with people who were outing themselves to me and saying, "Hey, I'm gay." And one of them in particular was somebody who completely caught me off guard. Like, number one, my gaydar was not very good, but it was a woman who I was getting to know, and she was a friend of mine. She was sweet, she was shy, she was very reserved, and she told me about her sexuality. And I was like, what? I can't believe it because I was told that she would be, like, swinging on the chandeliers and, like, hitting on me all the time, and, like, it just she was completely not that, and just that we have these stereotypes of over-sexualizing people because they have a different orientation, like, it's not just about sex even. It's an orientation of interest, but it's not that because somebody's not straight doesn't mean that they're, like, living this wild lifestyle that is I'm not saying that people shouldn't have consensual fun and all of that stuff, but it's just that
Mm,
the stereotypes we're given are so often untrue, and when you actually meet real people, you're like, "How could somebody hate this person? They're the sweetest person in the world." And so, yeah, that's really helpful. And I'm wondering for my next question, like, can you talk us through some of the specific struggles that you have seen LGBTQ plus individuals face when confronting like unresolved trauma? Like, what are some of the things that maybe people on the outside don't realize and people on the inside of the LGBTQ plus community might need to hear as like
mm,
affirmation that you're not alone in some of
mhm.
these struggles?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting off is just, I think, trust, struggling with learning to trust people, because I think and really forming healthy relationships, and trust is so core to that. And I know for me, I became very, like, ultra independent to a really unhealthy level that I just because of the environment I was in, I learned don't depend on anyone, don't trust anyone, you will be harmed. But it also stopped me from really belonging in a social group and making friends. That was like a trauma response to protect me. And so I think that's what a lot of people don't talk about. It's just the damage that is done to queer people in forming, I think, healthy friendships or socializing with people because you're in an environment where we're socially rejected a lot. You experience even like maybe a lot of microaggressions or just straight out aggressiveness or hatefulness towards you. And you learn that, oh my gosh, if people know who I really am, then they'll hate me, I'll be punished, I'm not safe, I'm gonna be harmed in this way or abused. So you learn not to trust people, you isolate, and you're in this state of hypervigilance of afraid, and like you try to change everything you can about yourself to try to fit in. So again, like there's not really this feeling of belonging because you shouldn't have to fit in to belong. And we need, as human beings, we need so desperately to belong and a place where we can let our guard down and be ourselves. And again, I think, like we were talking about earlier, that internalized homophobia that happens. And I think also like the religious trauma of, oh my gosh, God is going to kill me. God is going to harm me because I'm doing this or this. And I think dealing with the cognitive dissonance of not believing that anymore, but still struggling with those fears of, oh, I'm going to hell, or oh, like this is going to happen. And I think just those feelings of like hopelessness that you'll never be happy, you'll never find acceptance. And I think also like dealing with the microaggressions that are in our social systems still on a daily basis, like even just going out in public. Let's just say like a couple might be going out, a queer couple, and like, if you're in the South, you're gonna get a lot of weird stares. And people do make their assumptions about you and treat you differently. And for me, when I worked in the fast food industry, I had to deal with quite a bit of homophobia and like really awful comments from different guests and just had to push on through that. And it's
Did you work
again,
at
like
Chick-fil-A? Just wondering.
I wasn't gonna say it, but
Did I guess
okay.
right?
Yes.
Oh my god. I'm not laughing at your trauma, I'm laughing at because as you're just saying that, I'm like, "That sounds like Chick-fil-A, and if you're a homeschooler, that would totally track."
Yes. And like I don't talk about it as much because people have gotten really upset at me that I worked there, and I understand. And it's and honestly, I was surprised the amount of queer people that worked at Chick-fil-A when I was there. But yeah, like you were saying, like when you're homeschooled and you're in this high control environment, there's not any other options. And like Chick-fil-A, despite all the crap they've done, I had a Chick-fil-A owner that was really affirming and accepting. So that was really great. So not all Chick-fil-A's are like that, even though corporate they have their policies and the beliefs in that and all of that stuff. But it made a big difference in my life, the people that I met there and the community there that was shown. But yeah, good old Chick-fil-A.
Oh my gosh, but seriously, like, we've gotta live, we live in a capitalist society, and if we were to, like, not work for any company who didn't have homophobic values, like, none of us would make a living, like,
Mhm.
unfortunately, that's our society,
Yeah,
and we try
mhm.
not to support bigoted companies. Like you said, when you're homeschooled, you don't have a lot of options first coming out of it, and
Yeah,
yeah, so I just again, not laughing at your trauma, just
I know, gee.
that sounds like Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, so with other things I think that queer people experience is that being in a family where they feel that they will never be loved and accepted, or just from the homophobia they see in their own family being like, "Oh, if they find out who I am, they will hate me." So I think a lot of attachment issues that happens because there's a lot of homophobia in the family. And I think and I experienced this, but I think a lot of people experience, I think, especially I think gay men, but I'm sure queer women experience this too, but just like a really harsh parent or a harsh father that kind of sees that difference from a young age and are bullied by their parent in a sense, and the trauma that happens from that because again you need a place to feel safe, and with trauma you are in a situation that is overwhelming and stressful and puts you into a state of like fight flight freeze or fawn, and you're not able to come back to a sense of safety. And there are associations with that in trauma, and there are triggers that happen, and you kind of physiologically go through that again until you can actually heal it. But in these environments, you can't really come back to a sense of safety because you're so isolated from society. Like the, in the family you're in is very religious. You're stuck at church, and a lot of the times you're homeschooled or you're in a Christian school. So there's no social environment where you can come back to a sense of safety. And again, going back to the isolation, like I isolated a lot. I would spend hours and hours by myself in like a forest that was near my house because I could just breathe because there was no one judging me, no one telling me to do this or that, believe this. Like I was away from the indoctrination. And so I think those are some of the things people don't think about and, the effects of conversion therapy on your own sense of self and your own spirituality in a sense.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are gonna be able to resonate with that from our audience and feel really seen by what you're saying. And I also think it's very educational to straight individuals as well of just, okay, this is another level of heaviness and another layer that LGBTQ plus people have to deal with day in, day out and on their healing journey. the last question that I wanted to ask is I want to leave people on a note of hope. And so I'm wondering if you have a word of encouragement or advice for people who have experienced abuse and at the same time also happen to be gay. Just what you would say to them just to help them keep going. And yeah, I feel like you'd have some wisdom to share there.
Yeah, I would say that there is hope and there is a place where you'll be loved and accepted. And I remember growing up just dreaming of a place where I would be loved and accepted and a place where I could be myself. And I think people should know that there are people out there who will do that for you. It takes courage and strength to go out and seek that, and I don't know everyone's situation, but I would say when you know you're ready and you have your resources and you'll be safe, find that environment, find that community, question, be curious. And again, like, it's not easy, like, I am so grateful that I was able to find the resources I did and escape that environment, but I would've never been able to if I would have never been curious and sought that out and claimed my own autonomy. And I think before you do search out those resources, I think getting to know who you are truly without all of those influences, getting in touch with your intuition and learning to trust that and knowing that you are not evil and that your mind and your body really want you to seek what is healthiest for you and it really wants to heal you. But it takes that step of courage to go find that.
Wow. Wow. And on that last note, it brings me really smoothly into the next question. I know we asked you this last time you were on the show, but I think our definitions evolve. And the question is just what does courage mean to you?
Yeah, I think courage to me is being willing to take risk and being true to yourself and not caring how people view you when you do take that step to be yourself and take risk.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. And interestingly enough, I've been doing a lot of back to back interviews for this show, and almost everybody this round has said something to the effect of having courage to be ourselves. And I just think that's a really interesting thread. And I love where that's going, and so many people affirming that because that really is powerful. I know people are going to want to find you in your work. You've got a great social media presence. I love your reels and TikToks. I know you've got a website and a podcast. So tell everybody all the things.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm very active on social media. Just look up Andrew Pledger, and I'm about to take a shift with my social media. So this might probably will be out when that happens, but I'm gonna start focusing, from a survivor's perspective of healing religious trauma using psychology and also like secular spirituality for people who don't necessarily want to believe in a higher power, but get in touch with their inner resources and get in touch with themselves. That's something, a focus I will be taking. And I think that'll be valuable for a lot of people. And my podcast, Speaking Up with Andrew Pledger, interviews a lot of survivors from religions and cults, and I also interview experts on those topics. And I'm about to come out in the summer. I'm very excited for a limited podcast series I'm doing on Bob Jones University.
Ooh,
And it's called, the intro is out right now in the trailer, but it's called Surviving Bob Jones University, a Christian Cult. And I'm really excited for that coming in the summer of 2023. So yeah,
oh
people,
my
please check
gosh.
that out.
That's
Yeah.
going to be powerful. Yeah, definitely let us know so we can share that around. And everybody
Mhm.
definitely follow Andrew. So much good work happening there in the podcast, on social media. And I always love to give people resources that have different options. Like we've had some guests on the show who give resources about surviving abuse and maintaining their religious faith. and how to square those together. And I love that we're able to offer resources and connections to people who are like, that's not really for me. I want to leave that behind. And so wherever you're at on your journey, I hope that you come to the Courage Conversation Show and know that you're welcome, you're included. We love having you here and that we want to provide resources for wherever you're at, whatever journey you want to take. And Andrew, thank you so much for offering those things, for being on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you. And everybody, if you're not aware of this already, Andrew is leading one of our Courage clubs, particularly for LGBTQ plus survivors. And these are online peer support groups, and we're just so thankful that Andrew is facilitating those sessions and that we're able to open this up to the community. So, thank you for being here today. Thank you for all of your hard work, Andrew.
Thank you, Ashley.
And everybody, feel free to, after you're done checking out Andrew's social media and all of his resources, to come on over and follow us on social media. Courage 365 can be found on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the different places. We even have a private Facebook group, and in the next slide, you'll see a link to that where we have a lot of great discussions that happen inside of there. And then one resource I want to highlight, we have so many on the website. If you go to courage365.org, we've got a need help tab. We've got a list of free resources that include ebooks and online trainings and tools and courage cards to help you through traumatic situations. But one thing I'm really proud of and I really love for us is our text message list. This is completely free. It's inspirational text messages that we send out Monday through Friday. The texts are written by survivors for survivors. And all you have to do to sign up is text the word courage to the number on the screen, which is 917-809-7311. Text the word courage to 917-809-7311, and you'll automatically be added to the list. We won't spam you. Your phone number is not shared with the other people on the list, but we have been getting such great feedback that this is one of the things that helps people keep going in the morning, that feels empowering, that feels like someone's there supporting them. And just so you know, you don't have to reply back to any of the text messages, but if you do, there's somebody on the end of the line who, as much as possible, we try to reply back. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please give this video a share or this podcast episode, however you are digesting this content. Sending you all so much love, and as always, live with courage.